morning, everyone, and welcome to another Fusion Talk, and today with Roberta Calarese. So today we are joined by a woman who doesn't just challenge the status quo, she redesigns it. Roberta isn't only a legal powerhouse and boardroom strategist. She is purpose architect who reimagines leadership as a force for good. Welcome, Roberta. How are you today?
Thank you, Yasmina, for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm so excited, and I really want as well our audience to know more about Roberta, from shaping Dubai's DIFC to founding Raya and uniting global change makers through the World with Purpose summits. She's dedicated her life to proving that profitability and purpose they can and must coexist. If you believe business is only about the bottom line, this conversation might just shake your foundation. Let's dive in. Ready for it?
Ready?
So, reimagining leadership through purpose. What catalyzed your shift from legal strategist to a purpose driven leader?
Thank you, Yasmina, for the opening and introduction. So the first point that I would like to make is that I wish I had dedicated my life to transforming business, to becoming a force for good. But my initiation into a more sustainable world actually came later on in life. It started around 2018, where I started to feel a deep dissatisfaction in working for organizations that looked at profitability as the sole driver of strategy and business decisions. I was deeply uninspired, and I think over time I felt that I could put my time to better use for people and planet. And I started a deep journey of introspection that of course, everything starts with ourselves first before we can change our outer world. So I started a deep journey of introspection that brought me to take a very important decision, which was to resign from a very successful corporate career in search for deeper meaning. And for about a year and a half, I only did inner journeys. So I did an amazing course at Cambridge University on circular economies. I did Leading from the Emerging Future at MIT with Professor Otto Scharmer. I did all my coaching certifications. So my inner journey brought me to decide that I wanted to do more than just being a lawyer. And that's where it all started.
Wow, what a courageous as well leap of faith to take this break, invest in yourself, and have this awakening.
Yes.
Salutes. So when did you begin to sense that leadership needs to move from control to co-creation?
I think leadership is a key enabler of the manifestation of the world as we see it today. You know, we make decisions at all levels of our lives. So when people talk about leadership, I want to maybe just define leadership as well, because leadership comes out in many aspects of our life. We lead as parents, we lead as siblings, we lead as friends, we lead as business leaders, right? So it's really about the quality of the decisions that we take in the present moment that actually manifest a better or worse future depending on our interior conditions. So for me, leadership is essential because actually it drives what we see today, and we need to continue to fortify it, and I think find a more purposeful leadership that actually starts to address the deeper problems, the systemic problems of people and planet.
What a beautiful definition, because you're looking at it holistically. Sometimes people might associate leadership with something purely corporate or a position or a title, but not having the agency behind
Correct.
any decision across all phases of life and all the roles that we have in life.
And I think I like what you said, Yasmin, and most of all, leadership starts with ourselves. So the first step is to learn to lead ourselves, right? Then everything else follows from there.
Exactly. And how do you define purpose in the context of leadership today?
Purpose has many, many definitions, but for me, purpose is doing something full with a meaningful intent of doing something good. That's really the way I define leadership. And it's really about how we can be of service. So I am deeply into servant leadership, and how can we empower others to actually succeed at what they're doing, but obviously always in a context of interconnection, right? Is looking at the system, because everything is deeply interconnected today. The system is deeply complex. So when I think of leadership with purpose, I think of how we can help others in actually ensuring that the system remains sustainable and has great longevity.
And it drives force for good.
Absolutely.
What are the key misconceptions executives they have when they're trying to embed purpose?
I think it's a bit the same misconceptions that you have when people talk about sustainability or people talk about ESG. These days, you could talk about purpose as being simply a brand. You could talk about purpose being a plaque on an organization's like door. The issue with purpose, or maybe not the issue, but the challenge with purpose is that purpose is the North Star of an organization, is the North
Direction.
Star of a leadership team, right? But to bring purpose to life, that's where the challenge is. So it's really easy to create a purpose statement. The challenge is actually bringing it to life. And to bring purpose to life, you need first and foremost that the leaders that are entrusted to bring purpose to life have the right mindsets
and believe in
and
it
believe
deeply.
exactly. I was just about to say, and are deep believers into not just the purpose, but everything else that you need to put in place to bring purpose to life. So when we look at what we do at Raya, and I know you're going to ask me about Raya, but maybe we can talk about it here, is how to embed purpose in organizations. And that means like, from the definition of purpose, which answers the question of why an organization exists and what problems does it solve for people and planet, is really the embedding of purpose into strategy, into governance. We will talk about governance as well a bit later, into redefining performance metrics, and then actually measuring the impact that profitability brings on long-term value creation. So this is, I think, the challenge that organizations have, because it's an entire ecosystem that where purpose run across every single touch point until the output, which is long-term value creation for people and planet.
It becomes the binding culture, and if it's not, it cannot be manifested in that.
Absolutely. Very recently, I was looking at a post that MIT did on LinkedIn, where they actually created this interesting structure of purpose organizations, and it was a house, and it had a few ideas. You have purpose, then you have some performance metrics, but putting it into practice, I think, is really the challenge that we face today. Also because the system is deeply complex. So if the system was an easier system, it will be easier to do it. But given the complexities, I think that there will be challenges in implementing purpose, but it is a necessity and not a nice to have.
Yes. And we want to pivot from this holistic grand definition and what it takes to understand more the governance side, because as well of the law, legacy, and the architecture of impact when you were in the other, let's say, arena. So how governance and legal frameworks, they can become tools for societal change. Like, what was the most defining moment for you while shaping the IFC?
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So let's maybe break it down one by one. So the first one relates to governance, right? So how can governance support in enabling purpose in leadership and in organizations? And I think that governance is actually the living system of decision making. So people think of governance as a set of static rules, but actually it isn't, because the decisions are an expression of the governance that an organization has. And I think that the more you're able to embed purpose into governance rules, the more purposeful decisions you're going to get, right? So if it's purely like profit-driven kind of decisions, you will get a profit-driven sole result, right? But as you start to think of, environmental, social, like human issues that you actually embed into governance, you will then start to force decisions made by the leadership that are going to be more purposeful, and I think more inclusive in terms of systems, support, and change. The legal systems, I think, are deeply important because if you ask me, and I'm sorry to be cynical here, is the fact that do we have enough time to really wait for business to find the soul or a conscious? I think no. I think we don't have enough time
Yeah.
before actually the planet is deeply disrupted. Do I think that business is going to find it by itself? No. But do I think that we have a stronger chance of actually creating a sustainable world through creating policy with purpose and legislation with purpose? Absolutely. And I would add something into it, which is the role of artificial intelligence. So I like to think of designing policy and legislation with purpose, but using AI as our wise friend and giving AI one primary directive, which is do no harm. And I think that when we actually start to tap into the incredible wealth that AI brings to us and our lives and start to actually design policy and legislation that looks at the entirety of the ecosystem, that looks at all the stakeholders of the ecosystem, but also understands better what are the trade-offs that we need to do and what is the damage that needs to be done by some of the trade-offs, but we actually understand it so much better. We can then, I think, take a more holistic view and create a better result. Listen, it reminds me of 20 years ago when we used to talk about corporate governance. And I remember that when we used to pitch as regulators, about governance, of how it helped organizations actually, be more profitable, attract better investments, access to cheaper finance. I remember that at the beginning, people really said, corporate governance is expensive. Why should we have an audit committee? Why do we need to have a nomination and remuneration committee? But what happened later was that the regulators superimposed it. Today we have, corporate governance codes. It's embedded into companies law. Nobody talks about it anymore, right? And that's where I think we really need to move on purpose, policy and legislation.
To be mainstream.
Absolutely.
And this is the core foundation before even starting the business.
Absolutely. Until we have the discussion where businesses have the luxury to decide whether they really embed ESG or not in their systems and processes, or whether sustainability is something that, they really want to focus on, I think that we're still not where we need to be. And, a lot of people these days, I don't know, Yasmine, I would like to also hear what is your experience, is the fact that sometimes I hear people telling me, oh, sustainability, it's like I'm tired of this word, or it's like ESG, this has gone out of fashion, right? And I ask people, I said, do you know the English meaning, the plain meaning of the word sustainable, which means that it continues over time, right? How can that be a luxury and not absolutely a necessity? So I don't know, what has been your experience?
My experience is that at the beginning, yes, some people were pretty overwhelmed because it was abstract. And then the more they knew about it, they were absorbing a lot of science and complexity. So fear as well was overarching. And then there was more excitement because it became, we say the buzzword, but they wanted to embed it because they were getting the knowledge and awareness what's in it for them and the planet, and they started to build the right internal structure and ecosystem for it. But now, if you look, it's not as sexy as before. Why? Thanks to political will, which is doubling down across the world, where some businesses are again shying away from it, where some regulation as well is specifying. This is not good news. But what is important is what you were saying, the nerve of purpose. When this is aware, it embed and it will activate and be active behind sustainability and ESG. And it is even beyond sustainability if anyone understands the tipping points and the business risk and the risk on humanity.
Absolutely.
So it is not only sustainability, do less harm and more good, and maybe just maintain where we are, although the maintenance may be on a status which is already degenerating. We need to shift to regeneration.
Absolutely. I was listening to a very interesting lecture of a professor called Tima Bansal. I don't know if you know her, but it was actually part of the Oxford Side Business School series. And she was talking about how the systems today, or the educational systems, don't really factor in the element of time. So if you look at it in business, everything is short term. When we prepare business plans, it's 3 to 5. Yeah, some organizations prepare, North Stars of 50 years. But when you look at actually the financial deliverables, they're always based on 3 to 5 year projections. And she says we really need to start to factor in time as a fundamental strategic component of determining decisions and outcomes. And I think that when we start to look at the long-term impact of the decisions that we take today, I think that lens will start to shift.
Absolutely. Time and the risks for all decisions, and decisions including the planetary boundaries and the societal boundaries. If it's only the economic lens, even if the time is long term, but many CEOs, they still want to max it out in their tenure, and the pressure behind the bottom line and shareholder value is, diverting the whole attention to the daily impact. And sometimes there's myopia, as if we have more time. We really don't have more time.
Absolutely. But as humans, we always live as if we are going to be immortal, right? Until, a hand from above takes us out of planet Earth.
Exactly.
I've been reading a very interesting book called The Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, written in 1969 by Buckminster Fuller. And it's as valid today as if it was 50 years ago, as if time didn't pass from 1969. But what's so interesting that I found in the book was the fact that he talks about how we have become so specialized through our educational systems, and how being specialized doesn't really serve us, because we always only look at problems from the angle of our specialization. But actually, if we are to navigate Spaceship Earth, and he says every single human is actually a crew member of Spaceship Earth, we really need to go back to what he calls, for example, in the ancient times, the great pirates. And he said if you looked at the great pirates that ruled the world, they were astrologists, because they would have to actually chart the courses of their ships based on the constellations above. They were naturalists, because they would have to understand the laws of nature and the laws of the sea, of how to manage. They were strategists, because they had to decide where they were going to take their treasure from. And they were builders, because they would build ships that would actually do that. So he actually says that we are kind of in a trap right now. But if we're really to, I think, emerge as powerful leadership, is really how do we become generalists. And if you look at the AI today, AI is going to take over the roles of many people, and we don't really need to be so specialized into anything. But I think we need to just acquire so much information in different topics that enable us actually to look at the system as a whole, as opposed to just solving problems in their very small and narrow parts.
What a great story. Thanks for sharing. I like also the Earth as a spaceship. How can legal institutions become enablers of sustainability and equity?
I think we've covered this in our previous question, because I think that they will simply superimpose through laws and regulations and mandate ESG requirements, sustainability requirements, so that really becomes part of mainstream business. So I think it has a very important role to play, and we need to accelerate that role to be able to drive change faster.
Yes. And what role does governance play in creating long-term, purposeful impact?
I think governance is a key enabler of decisions. So I think that we need to continue to strengthen our governance systems. We need to put purpose into governance, and so that we make sure that decision making and leaders are aligned with more purposeful outcomes.
And it should be as well, I think, the common glue across. Like, it's not one person in the board, owning it. It is the shared ownership, the shared oversight. Like each one is the alarm clock of the other, to pinch when there is something going against the current of purpose.
Listen, I think it all starts with mindsets and cultures of organizations that are reflections of the leaders that run them, right? So, how do you actually drive inner transformation at the leadership level to be able to really create governance systems and cultures that are there to solve the planet, the problems of people and planet? So listen, I'm not a deep fan of traditional leadership transformation. I don't know, I'm sure through the course of your years, Yasmine, in the corporate world, you have done so much. I have done so much, but I don't see that the output of these kind of trainings and developments really matches what is the requirement of an
The needs
organization. So
now.
I think that we need to be more disruptive on inner leadership transformation. I think we really need to go back to the self. And most of all, I think in also designing purpose led organizations, the hiring process should be very rigorous. And so, really bringing in people that are deeply aligned with purpose, with inner development, with
Values.
leadership empowerment, with servant leadership, with values absolutely that match the purpose. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So I think that it really starts there. So it's kind of addressing root causes, because if not, everything else is more of a, technical exercise or an operational
Purely
exercise.
functional.
Absolutely. Then people actually driving it from within.
That's why the behavioral, it is overarching, it is defining, and we need to reinvent even the whole learning and development, and we need to instill those values even in schools. Like
Absolutely.
many of the textbooks and the curriculums are ancient. I mean, they are old with respect to how the world is pacing in terms of development, what is required, how we need to be fit for the future at an earlier stage, not wait for a corporate to groom us.
Absolutely. That's, beyond systems change at organizational level, I think the key fundamental part is the educational system. Like, as you mentioned, is absolutely obsolete. It is no longer relevant. It only serves to specialize people, like we mentioned, whilst actually we need to learn to be generalists. But most of all is how do we plant these seeds of awareness at a very, very young age. So out of my inner journey, every single thing I have learned on, whether it is wisdom, ancient wisdom, philosophical, like
Yeah.
pearls, I have planted every single one of those seeds in the minds of my kids, right? I share
Bravo.
absolutely everything. And I am not so concerned about how they're going to sprout, but I have seen miracles happen in front of my eyes. I have 4 kids, so I have
Smaller.
3 daughters and 1 son, but I have seen this incredible seeds just sprout in the most unexpected ways, so that actually my children can also be of support to their friends, their generation, and actually inspire them to search for greater meaning and to search for purpose at a very young age. And I want to give you just a very interesting story. My daughter Alia, who is an outstanding student and graduated from the US, was part of World with Purpose, the first edition. And I remember she was the voice of youth. And she stood on stage, Yasmine, and she said, I am only 21 years old and I have not yet found my purpose, but I am inspired to look for it. And actually, about a year and a half ago, she came back to me and she said, I have found my purpose. I have decided to bring back ancient wisdom to modern nutrition and really help the UAE population to actually live wholesome and healthier lives, right? And then when she came back from the US after she graduated in economics, the first thing that she did is she actually launched her own brand. So she's actually not even a brand. It's really like healing through food, which is her concept. And she's only 22 years old, but that was an amazing way of a seed that was planted,
How
that's
it
planted
sprouts.
into something that ultimately ends up in an impact on the community.
It all starts from within, then our household,
Correct.
and raising them to be the global citizens, open-minded, challenging, and being curious to create value. And it's wonderful that she as well came back to really invest her purpose in her
Correct.
country, and it is in sync with the year of community. So it is
Absolutely.
all about the social element, bringing the wisdom and nutrition, community, longevity. I love this alignment.
Absolutely. And you
So
talk
proud of
about
her.
the power of communities, which
Yes,
it's the year of communities in the
exactly.
UAE, but I think it's such a powerful theme, and I think that purpose is actually an enabler of the power of communities, and that's why in the UAE we are deeply blessed with purposeful public sector leaders, really that go above and beyond anything that anybody would expect their public sector leaders to do, never resting on any kind of victory of achievement and always looking what's the next frontier for actually empowering communities and for actually the people of the UAE to live very, very purposeful and wholesome lives.
You remember when the ministries of tolerance and happiness were created? It was the first
Absolutely.
timer ever
Absolutely.
globally. So
Absolutely.
this is the wisdom and the care of having people at the center and its residents and citizens.
Absolutely.
So let's move to Gaia and the world with purpose. How you started to build ecosystems. What inner knowing led the birth of Gaia and the World with Purpose Summit series?
That's
Your babies,
it's a
other than the
it's a
four
wonderful
kids.
question. So during my inner journey, I was invited to attend an event in Dubai called Save Soil by an Indian guru called Sadhguru. And actually, at the time when they sent me the invitation, they said, Sadhguru is coming to Dubai. Do you want to go see him? And I remember sending back a message saying, I am not really inspired and I really don't want to go. But God had a greater plan that I actually go to see Sadhguru. So through a random series of circumstances, I end up on the 29th of April 2022 to sit in this beautiful hall in Zabil. But beyond actually attending the event, I ended up meeting Sadhguru.
Oh, wow.
I end up sitting next to him, and then we become part of the entourage. We had at the time Her Excellency Mariam Al Mehiri, who was the Minister of
I love
Sustainability.
her.
We had Sheikh Nayan, who was the Minister of Tolerance, and we had a few other people. So, in typical Arabic fashion, when you have an honored guest, you accompany the guest. So we accompany him on stage, and I sit down, and I remember I was in a moment, I think, of deep listening and stillness. And that's where I received my purpose.
Wow.
And the purpose was a simple sentence, which was leadership with purpose.
Okay.
In that moment, I understood what I was meant to do in the version 2.0 of my life, which was really to inspire leaders to lead from a place of purpose. And as we just said, our public sector leaders are already deeply purposeful leaders. So definitely they didn't need me to impact anything. But what came very soon as a realization was the fact that private sector leaders in this part of the world are not really purposeful leaders. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done on the role of business in enabling global prosperity, in supporting national agendas for sustainable development, in supporting the sustainable development goals. And that's how I ended up creating Gaia, which actually means purpose in Arabic. So that's my purpose to impact consulting firm. So we do very large transformations of organizations to become purpose-led businesses. And at the same time, I also started a conversation, which is a series of summits called World with Purpose. You have attended my first edition.
Mind-blowing.
Also, Yasmine. So we did the first edition under the Ministry of Economy of the UAE in partnership with the UAE CSR Fund, the Majra. And we just launched now the second edition that was completed in Saudi Arabia to support Vision 2030 and sustainable development in Saudi. And we actually brought to Saudi 100 of the global family businesses to meet the Saudi family businesses and forge partnerships for change. And if I just may add, the reason why we actually focused the second edition on family businesses is because family businesses hold incredible economic power, and yet they're not part of this meaningful conversation. So how do we actually bring them in, create the right mindsets, plant the right seeds of awareness, and really enable sustainable development?
Wonderful, wonderful how you received the calling. It touched your soul, and it gave you this awareness and momentum to just, like the caterpillar. When you go outside your cocoon as a butterfly and you're hovering in the world with purpose. And family businesses as well, it's key because we all know it's about treasuring the legacy and giving it, years of generations ahead. So trying as well to onboard them in the journey of purpose is wonderful. And there is a huge opportunity because they will shift the whole economy when they are onboarded and embed SDGs in their decision making.
And maybe 2 points to add there. Number one, related to the year of communities, is the fact that family businesses are the cornerstone of communities because everything starts with the purpose of the family. And so they have an incredible role, but also an incredible opportunity to be key drivers and lead with purpose in building empowered and purposeful communities. And the other part that I think is meaningful about family businesses is philanthropy. And, also a lot of family businesses set a lot of philanthropic foundations. And I think that philanthropy, even though is a stopgap measure to actually, really deeper systems change and business as usual, even for family businesses, philanthropy can be a key enabler of sustainable development and systems change because it has patient capital. It does not have to comply to quarterly returns or ROIs. It can invest in whatever it wants to invest in. It can try experimental ideas. And once it actually finds ideas that actually work for systems change, it can scale them up for impact. So I would really spend some time also looking at how we can transform philanthropic institutions to really drive greater systems change.
This is a great call to action. And not always we hear someone, thinking about philanthropy as a pillar of change. Usually it's just, we understand it's donations, uplifting community here and there, maybe sporadic initiatives.
Correct.
But the way how you put it all together as well another force for the community in a purposeful way, in a concerted way, it's ingenious. What have you learned about systems change and listening across sectors and silos?
The systems change is deeply complex, deeply, deeply complex. I think that we are not, as leaders, equipped today for many of the things we have touched on before to actually address systems change. I think that we need to acquire a mindset of becoming more generalist and also having much more collaborative approaches. So really, number one, using rigorous analysis and data to determine the problems, but looking at the overarching problems, not breaking it down into the very small components, but also really collaborating with one another and having a hands-on approach on how can we actually solve the problems of people and planet. That's number one. In terms of silos, I think there is just so many silos in the world. I think that even in terms of, the green army, impact investors, sustainability, like global thought leaders, there is a lot of effort that is happening. But because it's all disconnected, the impact and the outcome
fragmented.
of that, absolutely, of that huge effort that is done is really minimal. It's almost negligible impact compared to everything else that is happening in the world. So how do we actually create global coordinated networks where we can start to really connect and collaborate? And I think AI is going to be a key enabler of building global coordinated networks that is going to allow greater communities, collaborations, impact, visibility on what everybody's doing, and then through AI possibly being able to match also projects with funders, with donors, so that we can actually, bring to life a lot of the efforts and startups that are being done that ultimately really just die away on the side. The other thing that I have witnessed in my journey of World with Purpose, and I think it's on purpose that I have witnessed this, has been the sheer obsession of business with money for the sake of money. Really, it's
Power,
exponential
authority.
growth for the sake of exponential growth. Why do you need to grow exponentially, right? And business, I think, has truly lost visibility of what good looks like. What is the purpose of business? Why business is a steward for the well-being and welfare of communities, for the longevity of the system. All that I witness is this deep obsession with money for the sake of money, right? And that's where I think regulators and policymakers play an important role, because I don't think business by itself is going to figure it out.
Voluntary approach is
Yes.
very minimal and negligible again.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if we don't have, it is like this human nature. We needed the religion to come to put us on track. Otherwise, everything it goes out of proportion. Laws, regulation, enforcement. But yeah. How do we move then from inspiration to tangible actions in such platform? Like we listen to speakers, great books, thought leaders. So there is inspiration here and there, and sometimes it moves you. But enough pledges and commitments and dreams. We really want action. How can this be channeled?
Listen, for me, it's very simple. We have two key drivers, in my opinion. One is policy, legislation, and regulations. The second one is artificial intelligence, using AI to expand human consciousness, coding AI to actually have primary directives that say do no harm, and that actually, really look at every time there is a decision that is made through the AI, whether it is a strategy document, whether it is a policy document, whether it is simple advice given to, the random humans like us using ChatGPT, that is always actually geared from a place of deep purpose, a place of sustainability, and a place of longevity. So I think that technology is an enabler of faster impact and output, and I think that policy and legislation needs to superimpose and accelerate changes.
I admire your advocacy for AI, especially from our Fusion Minds AI platform. And I've read the announcement from Sheikh Mohammed as well. Now part of the federal government, there will be the AI as an advisor. And as well, and another one for the laws.
Absolutely, is the regulatory
Exactly. This is the future. And I love seeing the future as well, being so endorsed highly in Dubai. We're so lucky to be in this part of the world.
And I think if you're able to create an AI that is not really biased, but has the right drivers
responsible.
Absolutely. The papers that get produced that we ultimately will analyze and adopt at least give us a much wider view of life, of people, of stakeholders, of the ethos, the possibilities. Absolutely, right? As opposed to just looking at what we do through our own bias and our own very, very limited lenses and knowledge.
And limited operating system.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No matter how much is our queue, we are still limited. So how much we can leverage in terms of accelerating innovation, system change,
and I think that AI is going to be a deep enabler of upgrading our operating system as humans. So I really see it in a very positive ways. There is always positive and negative, but I'm very, very hopeful that it will actually bring incredible expansion and empowerment to the human race.
Yes. Wow. Okay. I love this. So female leadership and values-based power. And I know this is a great side as well of you, and you started from leading the inside out. You led as well the first female leadership platform at Majid Al Futtaim. So how did this come to life?
First of all, I'm a woman.
Mm.
Second of all, I have 3 daughters. Third of all, I am a woman's person. So most of my friends are women. I absolutely am a great supporter. But I am also a believer that it's not just about women leadership, it's about unity and inclusivity. This is what I really believe in. I believe that everything in life is about the oneness of everything. So I actually enjoy, I come from an investment banking background. So I spent most of my life in very male dominated environment, but I never really measured myself as a woman. I only measured myself as a human being doing the best that I could, right? And maybe because of that approach and because of that mindset, I didn't really come across in my life, not to say that other people had different experiences of glass ceilings or of like prejudices towards women. At Majid Al Futtaim, I was inspired to actually build the first female leadership program. The company had already been in existence for 20 years, and yet they had not done something specific for women. But the way I see the opportunity is really to co create something with actually the masculine leaders as well, because I think that it's very important. You know, both in ourselves, we have both feminine energy and masculine energy. And masculine energy is about doing, executing, it's data, it's logic, it's fast. And feminine energy is the creative energy. It's about creating space and about being and allowing something to emerge. And I think that we can both benefit, male leaders and female leaders, from allowing each other to be in our own space. So I am very passionate about authentic leadership. And I think that as women, having been raised in a very male dominated world, we lead from a place of masculine energy and not from a place of feminine energy. And so, how do we create energetic containers, but also physical enablers that allow us also to lead from a place of feminine energy? Because I think that that balance of execution coupled with the power of creativity and space is going to be an incredible force for amazing decisions and impact for any organization, but also for any kind of gathering or project that people have, where we allow each other to be
To thrive.
to thrive and be in our own authentic energy, but also to lean on each other and learn on each other so that we can use whatever energy we need. Because sometimes as women, we also need to execute. So to tap into masculine energy and also inspire male leaders to actually tap into feminine energy so that they can also like relax, you know, open up, allow for space.
Express.
And absolutely. And I
Connect.
think also lead from the emerging future, right? You can only lead from the emerging future when you're able to create space and see what is wanting to emerge from the future into the present moment. And to do that, you have to tap into feminine energy.
It's one of your, legacies there. And it's always, heck, it fills you with pride to initiate something which is meaningful, and it helps as well the rest of your colleagues to thrive in building something that contributes to the positive culture. What are the most critical support structures missing for women leadership?
I think is understanding one another. I think is having open conversations, is understanding what are the struggles that we have vis-a-vis what are the struggles that men have. I read an amazing book called Dear Lover by an American writer called David Dada. He writes 2 books, one for women and one for men. And the one for men is called The Way of the Superior Man. And he explains really simply that women are driven by love and men are driven by purpose and freedom, which are really 2 fundamentally different drivers, right? Because, you know, being led by love or being driven by love means that you are a nurturer, right? Yani you host,
Yes,
places and you
yes.
allow you are the springboard of somebody, right? But for us to be able to lead from a place of love, we must also be deeply centered and comfortable and allowed to be in our feminine energy. And men actually go out there to conquer the world, which is not necessarily the role that actually we have been given as women to do that. And so how do we understand these drivers and start to create spaces that support one another. So I think it's important to have conversations, open conversations, to build bridges where we can meet halfway, and then from there rely on each other's strengths.
To prosper, we can only
Correct.
prosper as one, excel together, lean on each other. No one can do it all alone by himself
Absolutely.
or herself.
And I wanted to just add one thing,
Yeah.
that at the second edition of World with Purpose, I decided to start a special conversation on women with purpose.
Yes.
Actually honoring incredible women who are driving change in the world, who are supporting entrepreneurship and sustainability and having impact on AI. And what was so interesting, that because on day 2 we run 2 parallel themes. So the Women with Purpose theme was off summit, and we had like disruptive investment roundtables. And I thought that everybody would have wanted to really be on the disruptive investment roundtables. And the surprise was that the Women with Purpose team was full house, and it was actually a very like informal, intimate conversation. We talk about the intelligence of the heart, we talk about coherence of heart, hand, and mind. But even men, there were so many that wanted to attend, and we didn't have enough places. So we actually decided, out of Women with Purpose, we did a wonderful award that actually we will continue the conversation. So this is something that we're actually starting to build right now. And you will be one of the Women with Purpose, Yasmine, that we will invite to speak for sure. But it was interesting because I felt there was a shift, because we had very senior business leaders at World with Purpose, but they were interested in being part of the conversation, which I think is the starting point.
Were the men attending really there as well to recognize and celebrate women, or they wanted to understand more what women are bringing and how they are shaping the future?
I think we found both. We had some men that were already deeply supportive of women and who expressly stated this, Yani, which was amazing. Actually, somebody I would like to mention was Piers Cumberledge, and Piers was the head of partnerships for the World Economic Forum for many years, but he also now is an adjunct professor of HSA, the French Business School, and he's been teaching the Leadership with Purpose course for PIF. So they're actually on the third cohort, and for Qatar Investment Authority. So it's amazing that also like supranational organizations like PIF and QIA are actually starting to have this conversation of leadership with purpose, and actually creating courses that are going to inspire their business leaders to lead from a place of purpose.
This is fantastic to see as well, that those sovereign funds, empires in such countries, they are even dedicating the time and the effort in order to shape the minds of their leaders when it comes to those noble drivers. And it's all again in the mindset. So how the mindset is evolving in our region, embracing purpose, embracing women, equity, community, sustainability, AI, with the whole investment, it is so assuring.
Absolutely. Even if you look at just
what
like
a melting pot.
UAE strategy 2071, it has purpose like inbuilt across the entire strategy. So I think that, our public sector leaders are definitely creating the right ground and terrain and making it fertile, so that all these great initiatives that are going to enable sustainable development and a prosperous society and great communities are there.
And when I look at it, although we are in the developing world, but I see, this canvas pretty developed, more than the developed countries.
Absolutely. We are so blessed to be in this region. Honestly, I am originally half Italian and Scottish. I am Emirati by marriage, but I could not think, first of all, the UAE is home, but I could not think of a better place today in the world that I would want to be in than the UAE. So deeply blessed to have had this opportunity in this lifetime.
Alhamdulillah. Can institutions truly regenerate if they don't evolve their inner logic? And you are the queen of the inner space.
I think it's a question that I would ask you, Yasmin, to get your feedback. But absolutely, I think I really like Simon Sinek and his talk on the infinite game of business versus the finite game of business. And in the finite game of business, you have known players, known rules, one outcome, which is to win. And if somebody has to win, somebody has to lose, right? And so that's a very short-term mindset that businesses have, which is actually most businesses today. But he also says that the infinite game of business, based on James Carthy's theory that he wrote, he was an economist in the 1950s, is the fact that the game of business has existed since the beginning of man, right? And will continue to exist until man will be on earth. And so, really, how do we create businesses that want to play in the infinite game? And in the infinite game, you have known and unknown players, known and unknown rules, but the outcome is to stay in the game as long as possible. And to stay in the game as long as possible, you have to actually, look at who is on your left and who is on your right, and then walk together and see how you actually solve each other's problems, how you enable each other's strategic deliverables, ultimately to creating benefit for all. So I think that I'm definitely somebody in the infinite game of business, and I think that that mindset shift is absolutely necessary.
I think by reiterating game, I thought it would be wonderful to start having such even board games and games that wire the mindset of the young generation, because most games are aggressive, are brutal, about killing, winning at the expense of everything. Even the language is becoming aggressive. Absolutely. So if we start rewiring not only the educational system, but the quality and the types of games, it will become, such an enabler for future leaders.
Absolutely.
And this is how we together have the infinite possibilities, instead just taking over and making others lose or die. It starts there.
I agree 100%.
And it affects the behaviors. Many observers, psychologists, therapists, they're seeing the anxiety, the higher level of anxiety in the new generation, all because of those stimuli, that are negatively charged.
Absolutely. A number of years ago, Majid Al-Futtaim, when I was at MAF, brought the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability to do we did a long seminar, an afternoon on sustainability, and I remember thinking at the time that if only we ever taught in kindergarten a course in miracles, which is a wonderful course I did a number of years ago, we would not even need to address any of these problems that we're trying to fix today, right? So it all goes back to what you said, Yasmine, that is really education, but it is really the ABCs of the education, starting from kindergarten all the way up.
I hope really this message, it ignites some of the thinkers, innovators there, even governments, to start embed some of those seeds of change that we are talking about. Because it starts from an idea, a spark, but it needs...
And to tell you something, out of the first edition of World with Purpose, I wrote a white paper for the Ministry of Economy and for the Ministry of Culture and Youth. And one of the initiatives that came out is an initiative called Purpose for Impact. And we are now discussing with Zayed University how to create purpose courses to inspire university students. And we ended up tying up with Professor Pulin Sangvi, who is the professor who designed the purpose courses for Princeton, Stanford, and Yale. And at Stanford, it was the most successful elective course ever launched by the universities that had incredible ripple effects. So we want to pilot it also for the UAE.
Bravo.
And then, of course, roll it out to the Middle East as well, as, we start to adapt it to our culture and our region.
All the best.
Thank you.
Congratulations. What would you say to a skeptical board about investing in ESG? It still exists.
That it's a must, that it's a necessity and is not is a nice to have. But I think, to to convince a board to do that, I think you need to go back to all the topics that we have discussed, Yasmine, which is, awareness, which is understanding, which is having the right leadership, the right governance framework. So it's really having a team of leaders in an organization that understands the importance of doing that.
Yeah.
And of course, the damage and the risks of not investing in ESG. And I mean, you can talk a little bit about that, but ultimately the long-term penalties that they're going to be actually having to face, the loss of income and risks that we're going to face if actually those at least funds are not invested in ESG. So it's going to be more expensive than actually trying to save money right now.
Exactly. Wouldn't add anything, because that's it. It's not only the resources and the cost of inaction, but simply they will lose their shoppers, their consumers, anyone who want to seek a product or service. They don't want or accept to be, associated or buyers with a company where the intrinsic values of purpose and sustainability aren't part of what they stand up for. Absolutely. And how they deliver what they do.
Absolutely.
How do you invite business leaders to lead from the future possibilities, not just patterns?
I think we've covered that one. The way to lead from the future is really to learn to be in generative listings. So part of my course at MIT based on Theory U, it talks about how we have 4 levels of listening. But the most important one, the first one is really like where we listen to disprove the other person. The other one where we debate with one another. But ultimately, when you learn to be in generative listening, it means that you create space. So you're no longer listening to prove your point or to disprove the other person. You're simply listening to understand what is wanting to emerge from the conversation. What is it that comes from the universal intelligence into the present moment? And I have been in many, many generative listening meetings where actually people are empowered and inspired, and then you come up with an idea and I come up with another idea, and then these ideas together start to form a prototype, right, of a great initiative. And that's really where you are no longer relying on simply past knowledge and what you know, but there is some kind of magic that happens. And that's where I think you start to figure out that there is a higher intelligence for sure, and that there is a way that that higher intelligence wants to guide things. And so we start to build things from the future into the present moment. So the answer is really being able to create space, listen attentively, and build on one another.
Wonderful formula, because this is the basic, like not hearing, but listening, and listening to understand. Absolutely. And not just to talk for the sake of talking, because there is wisdom and a lot of learning when we appreciate the voice of one another and the knowledge, the expertise, the depth, and that's how we can synergize.
Excellent.
Fire chat. So I love the generosity really in how you share and put things into perspective, but I want to challenge you in rapid closing questions. One sentence that defines Roberta today.
A random human being trying to figure out life. That's it.
And purpose. Bring more purpose to life.
Yes, and listen and serve for the time that I have here. These are really the 2 key things that are very alive and important for me right now, is keep learning more about myself and keep elevating, shedding everything that doesn't serve me in the journey, so I don't have to carry all this weight of things.
Baggage.
And for the time that I have left on planet Earth, to simply be of service. How can I help, people?
So hello, so sublime. A book that changed your perspective. And you're an avid reader. Like, I love all the references to the books and the authors.
So when I was at MAF, I sponsored 4 top performers. And when I asked who was assigned to me, I requested that I have 4 women assigned to me. And one of them was this wonderful Indian lady called Ashna, who I mentored for about a year. And then she decided to resign. And she actually went back to India to teach underprivileged kids. So she was a Bain consultant, incredibly smart lady. And when she left, she gifted me a book. And this book, she actually gifted me like a parcel of things. And then I went home, I opened it up, and I pulled out this book. And the book was called Old Path, White Clouds, written by the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who is the Nobel Prize for Peace. And I remember looking at the book and thinking, well, if the universe has sent me this book, I guess I need to read it. And the book was 600 pages, so it was not a small book. And I picked up the book and I said, let me see what the book is about. And it was actually the life of the Buddha. It was the story of the life of the Buddha. Until today, I think it is the highest level of accountability that I have received from the universe in terms of right path, right thought, right word, right action, the 8 noble paths of Buddhism. Not that I would ever be a Buddhist or I would reach that level of entitlement, but simply having that awareness of what good looks like and constantly striving to get there. That has been maybe one of the most amazing books that I have ever read.
Wasn't it something that during the World with Purpose Series 1, something out of this book that you shared with your daughter during her studies?
Yes.
There was a reference and it struck my attention.
So I love the book so much.
Yeah.
And going back to how I actually share everything I learn on my own inner journey with my kids.
Exactly.
I actually shared every single lesson I learned from this incredible book with my daughter Alia. And when she was in university at USC in LA, she actually took Buddhism as a course.
Really?
But she never studied the text. But when she did the exam, she passed 100%. And she wrote to me, she said she got 100% mark. She says, Mom, thank you so much for sharing with me in such a detailed manner all the wisdom you learned, because it enabled me to score 100% in my exam without ever having to study the book.
A master
so that was, yes, that's a great memory.
Yeah, I love it because really it resonated in me. Yes. And I thought, wow, no, whatever you learn, you keep on nurturing around you and sculpturing as well your kids.
Yes.
So, chapeau. A lesson you wish every young professional would learn earlier.
Start your inner journey as early as you can. I started my inner journey in my mid-40s, and I look at my daughters and my son who start their inner journey at a really young age. I wish that I knew what I learned today at their age. I mean, I think that the change in the world would have been incredible.
A habit you swear by?
Breath work.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. I think it's phenomenal for the brain, for connecting, for calming the nervous system, for allowing you to have greater insights. And I actually practice it now every day when I drive to work in the morning. I put my breath work and I'm driving and I'm still practicing it. So I think it's a wonderful habit.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Roberta, for such a wonderful fusion talk. In a world chasing quarterly returns and quick wins, Roberta reminds us that the most enduring value comes from anchoring in purpose. Her journey from legal reformer to ecosystem builder reveals that institutions don't have to choose between profits and principles. They can and should embrace both. As we close today, let this be your call to action. Lead with clarity, govern with courage, and never underestimate the ripple effect of values-centered leadership. The future belongs to those who lead on purpose. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to stay tuned to future episodes from Fusion Talks at Fusion Minds AI.